Hello, and thank you for taking the time to listen to my story. My name is Olivia, and I am a 35-year-old educator from Georgia. Today, I want to share something deeply personal and transformative that changed how I view not only myself, but the world around me. Something that changed my understanding of history, faith, and identity. This is the story of my near-death experience, an event that ultimately revealed to me startling truths about African American origins, truths that I had never known before. But before I dive into that, I would love to hear where you're listening from. Even though we may be miles apart, knowing where you're tuning in from brings a sense of closeness. I'd also appreciate it if you could like and comment on this story. Let's keep this an open, respectful conversation where we can all share, learn, and grow together. Now, let's begin. It was August 14th, 2023. And for months leading up to that day, I had been struggling with my health. I felt exhausted, drained, and in pain, but the doctors couldn't figure out what was wrong. It all came to a head that evening. I was in my living room talking with my husband about our kids' schoolwork. And then, just like that, everything went dark. It's hard to explain what happened next, but one moment I was in my house, and the next I was no longer there, no longer in my body. I felt light, almost weightless, as though I was floating. It was as if I had left the confines of this world and entered somewhere entirely different. I found myself in a vast, radiant space. The air around me shimmered with light, bright, warm, and comforting. And then, standing before me was Jesus. He was dressed in dazzling white robes, and his eyes, his gaze, went right through me, into the very core of my being. In that moment, I felt something that words can't truly capture. Deep, unconditional love, peace, and comfort all at once. Every fear I had ever known seemed to vanish, replaced by a profound sense of safety. In that instant, I knew I was with someone who had all the answers, someone who understood me like no one else could. For a while, Jesus didn't speak. He simply looked at me, his presence calming and reassuring. Then, in the most gentle voice, he said, "Greetings, Olivia. You have a purpose." I was stunned. I had 1,000 questions racing through my mind, but before I could ask any of them, he began to speak again. And what he shared with me that day changed the course of my life forever. One of the first things he told me about was the so-called curse of Ham, a story I, like many others, had heard countless times growing up. In church, I had been taught that black people were somehow cursed because of Noah's son, Ham. It was an explanation that had been used throughout history to justify slavery, discrimination, and racial injustice. I had believed it too at one point, but Jesus told me something that completely shattered that belief. "The curse of Ham has been misinterpreted for centuries, Olivia," he explained. "The curse was never meant to fall on black people." I could hardly believe what I was hearing, but Jesus was adamant. He told me that the curse wasn't on Ham, but on Canaan, Ham's son. He explained the story from Genesis 9:18-29, where Noah, after becoming drunk, exposed himself to his sons. Ham, rather than covering his father's nakedness, had looked at him, and for that, Noah cursed Ham's son, Canaan, not Ham himself. This curse was not about race, but about disobedience and sin. It was about one man's failure, not the fate of an entire people. Hearing this revelation was like a light bulb going off in my mind. The curse was never meant for black people. It was meant for Canaan and his descendants. And yet, over the centuries, that truth had been distorted and twisted, used by people to justify oppression and inequality. Jesus made it clear. The curse was not about skin color. It was about sin. And in this moment, I felt as if the entire weight of history's misinterpretations was being lifted off me. As we walked together through that brilliant space, Jesus showed me something even more powerful. He began to explain the true history of black people, starting with their divine beginnings. For years, I had harbored misconceptions about African heritage, believing the false narratives that had been passed down through generations. But Jesus revealed to me the truth, the beautiful, sacred truth. that African heritage was not a curse, but a blessing. Olivia, you have a lot of misconceptions about Africans, but I will show you the reality, he said. He took me on a journey through history, showing me the significance of Ham's descendants. He spoke of Kush, Mizraim, and Put, each of whom played a pivotal role in the rise of ancient civilizations. Kush, he told me, was the father of the mighty kingdom of Kush, which stood alongside Egypt as one of the great civilizations of the ancient world. One of the most striking things Jesus shared with me was that the word Kush itself meant black in the biblical sense. And far from being a term of shame or degradation, it was a symbol of beauty, strength, and honor. Their history is not one of disgrace, but of pride and power, he said with a smile. This was a history that had been buried under layers of distortion, a history that needed to be reclaimed. He told me that blackness was never meant to be a source of shame. It was always a sign of beauty, strength, and divine purpose. Despite centuries of misrepresentation, Black people's true identity, rooted in strength, honor, and blessing, had been obscured by those who sought to control and oppress. In that moment, I understood that what had once been used to oppress and demean was, in fact, a sacred and blessed identity. What I had once seen as a curse was, in truth, a profound blessing, a divine favor that had been hidden by the lies of history. This experience, this revelation, transformed everything I thought I knew about myself, my people, and the divine. It opened my eyes to the powerful sacred truth that Black people are not only a product of strength and resilience, but also of divine purpose. And it is this truth that I carry with me every day as I continue my journey, sharing this story and helping others to see the reality of our history, our strength, and our sacred identity. I realized via Jesus that Cush's descendants were an essential component of God's human design. He said, God gave these people wisdom, leadership, and divine favor. Egypt, Ethiopia, Kush, and Nubia were not cursed African countries. They were selected for a greater purpose in the ancient world and were inspired by God. Jesus revealed something to me about ancient Egypt that was among the deepest. I have always been fascinated by Egypt's secrets and history. I have been captivated by the pyramids, the gods and goddesses, and the amazing accomplishments of the ancient Egyptians since I was a little kid. However, the deeper divine link between Egypt and the creation myth and God's ancient peoples had never made sense to me. According to Jesus, Egypt was never intended to be seen as just a land of slavery. It is a cradle of civilization, a place where wisdom and knowledge are shared with the world. Jesus clarified that the Egyptians were descended from Mizraim, one of Ham's sons. The Egyptians shared a privileged ancestry with Kush, he said. Egypt was not just a place of enslavement, he added, adding that they were a chosen people who were given immense knowledge and wisdom that was eventually transmitted to other nations worldwide. It was a repository of heavenly wisdom and a knowledge base intended for dissemination. My plan to shape the world included the teachings of the great spiritual leaders, the pharaohs. Jesus gave me a kind glance. I can relate to the suffering you've endured because of Egypt's involvement in the Israelites' slavery. However, the Egyptians were originally divinely selected to bring knowledge and light to all countries, even if they had fallen into idolatry. As I stood with Jesus and took in what he was teaching me, I experienced a deep change in my spirit. I had always felt lost and uncertain about my role in the world, but Jesus was revealing to me a new reality, a truth with divine roots that dated back to the dawn of time. He went on to explain how generations of suffering, prejudice, and sorrow had resulted from twisted facts about race and identity, and from misreadings of the Bible. However, he said that the moment for recovery had arrived. The moment has come for the truth. There was no such thing as the curse of Ham. I had never experienced such a deep sense of peace and clarity in my earthly life as Jesus continued to lead me through that bright space. It was a spiritual misunderstanding, a misunderstanding that has been used to oppress, distort, and obscure the beauty of Black people's heritage. My old wounds were soothed by the truth, which was like a balm. The reality of the curse of Ham, how it had been misunderstood to excuse centuries of injustice and hate, was already revealed to me by him. But more was to come, and Jesus, ever patient, started to delve deeply into the riddles of the divine origin of Black people. He responded, "Olivia, there's more to the story. I want you to see the legacy of strength, wisdom, and love that was passed down through generations of my people." He then unveiled a vast tapestry of civilizations, including Ethiopia, Egypt, Nubia, Kush, and others, all of which were descended from Kush. According to Jesus, these nations were essential to God's plan for humanity. The ancient kingdom of Kush, which flourished along the Nile River, was revealed to me. They were instrumental in forming the globe long before the disarray and division that would follow. In addition to being strong in combat, the Kush people were also spiritually knowledgeable. Jesus said that they were guardians of holy wisdom. Their knowledge of creation and the divine laws of the cosmos was a gift from God, intended to light up the hearts of all nations. I saw relics, old temples, and texts that described a close and profound relationship with God, which many people today were utterly ignorant of. I was overcome with emotion when I witnessed the magnificent Nubian queens, like Queen Amanirenas and Queen Makeda, who bravely, gracefully, and powerfully led their people. Jesus said, these women were not just political leaders, but spiritual leaders. They saw that they were called by God to lead their people in love and knowledge. In my eyes, they were adored. The kingdom of Egypt also served as evidence of God's divine favor. Despite their eventual descent into idolatry, Jesus demonstrated to me that the Egyptians had been at the forefront of intellectual and spiritual advancement. He said Egypt was the birthplace of learning, not a place of servitude, but where divine knowledge flourished. Moses was raised in Pharaoh's palace for a reason, not by chance. Jesus taught me that Egypt's so-called idolatry was once part of their spiritual path, meant to benefit the world with wisdom. Egypt was always meant to be a source of light, though its people lost their way. I saw how the African diaspora, through the forced migration of millions via slavery, was part of God's greater plan, not an accident. Despite immense suffering, Africans spread knowledge, faith, and resilience across the world. Jesus explained that slavery was a result of human greed, not God's will, but that the African people carried a divine spark, a strength that endured through hardship. The Black community isn't just surviving. They are warriors, children of a divine legacy. I thought of leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. and abolitionists who fought for justice and freedom, guided by God's plan. Even in their darkest times, God sent prophets and leaders to lead them forward. Jesus also helped me understand African mysticism, how the ceremonies, reverence for ancestors, and connection to nature weren't rebellion against God, but a reflection of deep spiritual ties. Honoring ancestors, he said, is not idolizing them, but recognizing their place in the divine story. I saw how African rituals, connecting with the elements, were ways of expressing God's presence in all things. God is in everything: the earth, the wind, the water, and the fire. It was then that I understood spirituality isn't confined to one culture or religion. It's a universal experience rooted in the same divine source. As I continued my journey, Jesus revealed how the fight for justice, equality, and freedom in the Black community is part of a divine purpose. The Black community's struggle, he said, is a spiritual battle, a fight for divine justice and truth. Their suffering isn't in vain. It's part of a greater cosmic plan to bring love, truth, and healing to the world. From the resilience of African slaves to the civil rights movements, the strength of Black people is God's will unfolding. I saw that their hardships were a testament to the holy spark inside them. Jesus showed me that one day the world would awaken to their true identity and mission. In his second coming, he would bring justice, peace, and reconciliation, especially for the Black community. They would no longer be misunderstood. Their divine legacy would shine. When I woke up in the hospital after being clinically dead for over 12 minutes, I knew what I had experienced was beyond human explanation. I had seen God's plan unfold, and I had felt His mercy and compassion. I now understand that Black people have a divine heritage of power, knowledge, and purpose. They are not condemned, they are chosen. To all who hear this, if you identify as Black, know that you are strong, loved, and part of something bigger. And to others, the message is clear. Love, understanding, and unity will heal the world. Together, we can restore peace and harmony.